Welcome back, grade 10s. In today's video, we will be focusing on the next abiotic component, and that is light. Can you think what is the most important living organism that depends on light in our ecosystem? Yes, it is the plant. Why do you think that the plant depends so much on light? Very good. Plants need light for photosynthesis. And what is photosynthesis? Correct. It is the process whereby the plant is making its own food with the use of carbon dioxide, light, as well as water. But, children, too much of a good thing can also be bad for you. Do you agree? And the same with the plant. Okay? Excessive light or too much of light can actually cause the plant's tissues to get damaged. Now, the effect of day length. What's that? Yes, it's the duration or the amount of time that the plant is exposed to light. Okay? So the effect of day length on the growth of a plant is known as photoperiodism. Okay? The following groups can be differentiated. We get short day plants, long day plants, and neutral plants. How are they different? The short day plants, only flower if the day length is shorter than 12 hours. Whereas the long day plants, which need a day length of more than 12 hours to flower. And then we get the neutral plants, And the neutral plants are not affected by day length, right? It's a type of plant that is able to flower regardless of the length of period of light that it is exposed to. Now, light intensity also affects the growth movements and the turgor of a plant. When I speak of turgor, what am I saying? Yes, if the light is too intense, if the plant is exposed to too much of light, what can happen is that it can lose turgor pressure, right? And this can result in the loss of water from the plant cells, causing the flowers and the leaves to start wilting. Now, some flowers, like the veggies, they tend to close if the light intensity is decreasing. But the evening primrose will open if the light intensity decreases. Some plants are adapted to the light intensity to which they are exposed. There is a difference between the sun plants and the shade plants. In shade plants, photosynthesis takes place at a much lower light intensity, And this can cause slow growth of that shade plant. If we look at some animals, like the moths and the bats, they are nocturnal. Nocturnal means that they are active only at night. Moles and earthworms that live underground also prefer darkness. Let's move on to temperature. Temperature is another example of an abiotic component. We know that the temperature that the plants and the animals are exposed to is going to be very, very different during the day and during the night, or between summer and winter. So let's talk about the two types of animals and how they adapt to these changes in temperature. The first type of animal will be the ectothermic animals. Now, the body temperature of ectothermic animals, children, depends on the environmental temperature, right? They become very inactive in cold winter temperatures and they like to hibernate in order to survive. What do we mean by hibernate or hibernation? It is known as a winter sleep, At this time, the metabolism of the animal and the heart rate of the animal decreases. let's look at endothermic animals, right? Now they keep their body temperature constant. Doesn't matter what happens outside of their bodies. They also hibernate, or they even migrate to warmer habitats during winter. If we look at the plant life, the annuals who are growing throughout the year, they complete their life cycle in one season and survive the winter in the form of seeds, while the deciduous trees lose their leaves in winter, thereby reducing their metabolism in order to survive. Some of the plants lose their epigeel, which are all the parts above the grounds, and then they hibernate in the form of bulbs, tubers, or rhizomes underground. Another example of an abiotic component is water. Now we know that water is very, very important, children, for the survival of all living organisms. Let's look at plants. Now plants are adapted with regard to their water needs, and they are divided into 3 types. We get the hydrophytes, mesophytes, and the xerophytes. How are they different? Well, the hydrophytes are plants that are adapted to grow in water. Example, the water lilies, right? Mesophytes are plants that grow in areas that have a moderate amount of water. Example, all the fruit trees, wheat, maize. And if we look at xerophytes, they are plants that are adapted to grow in extremely dry conditions. They are also known as succulents. Very good. And an example would be the aloe vera and even the hoodia. Now these xerophytes are adapted to survive in this very, very dry conditions. Okay? Because they have leaves that are thick and fleshy and able to store a lot of water. They have very small leaves. Their stomata are sunken. They have very, very thick cuticles to prevent desiccation, which is the drying out of the plant. And they have a very, very well-developed root system that are able to penetrate deep underground where the plant can have some access to water. Then we have animals that are also adapted in different ways with regard to water. The kangaroo rat never drinks water. Where does it get its water from? It obtains its water from its food. Some animals like the camel and the springbok, they live without water for long periods. Desert animals like the camel excrete urine in the form of crystals to retain as much water as possible in the body. Animals like the earthworms, they need very cool, dampy soil in order to survive. If we look at our insects, you'll realize that they have a very hard exoskeleton. And this exoskeleton is important because it prevents dehydration of this insect's body. The body of a reptile is covered in hard, dry scales to prevent water loss. Now, animals that are adapted to live in water are called aquatic animals. How are they adapted to live in the water? Well, the fish have gills that allows for gaseous exchange, and they have fins for swimming and for balance. Whales, seals, dolphins, they have lungs, and they come up to the water surface to take in oxygen. And that is how these animals are adapted to survive in water. Let's move on to the next abiotic component, and that is the atmospheric gases. Learners, the air around us consists of gases, right? But not just one type of gas. It consists of a mixture of gases. What type of gas do we find in the atmosphere? Well, let's begin with the nitrogen. We have nitrogen in the atmosphere. We have oxygen present in the atmosphere. We have carbon dioxide, as well as varying amounts of other gases as well. Let's begin with nitrogen. In the atmosphere, we find 78% of nitrogen gas. 21% of the atmosphere is consisting of oxygen. 0.04% is consisting of carbon dioxide, while 0.96% are other gases in varying amounts, such as water vapor. Now, all living organisms, children, except for the anaerobic bacteria, need oxygen for respiration. What are the anaerobic bacteria? An anaerobic bacteria is any organism that does not require oxygen for growth, okay? And if it does come into contact with oxygen, it can react very negatively or even die in the presence of oxygen, okay? So all living organisms except for this anaerobic bacteria need oxygen for respiration. Then what needs carbon dioxide from our environment? Very good. Carbon dioxide is needed by our green plants when she is busy photosynthesizing. Very good. And all land organisms, all the terrestrial organisms, they take oxygen directly from the atmosphere. Aquatic organisms absorb it from the water, and soil organisms obtain it from the air between the soil particles. Now the plants are able to absorb nitrogen in the form of nitrates from the soil, while the animals are able to obtain it from the food that they eat. Now, how are plants and animals adapted for gaseous exchange? Well, you know that animals have their own respiratory organs, okay? And these respiratory organs have their own specialized gaseous exchange surfaces. Example, let's look at the birds and mammals. They have lungs. Fish have gills. And the moist, naked skins of earthworms function as a gaseous exchange surface for them. What do plants have? Plants have stomata on their leaves, and their stems also have stomata, through which gaseous exchange is able to take place. If we look at woody plants, they have lenticels for gaseous exchange. Now, to facilitate gaseous exchange, all our underwater plants have a very thin epidermis and no cuticle. If we look at the aquatic insects, like the water beetle, they are able to trap air bubbles between their body hairs for gaseous exchange. And the final abiotic component we are looking at is wind. Children, what is wind? Very good. Wind is moving air, is able to speed up processes of evaporation and transpiration. And this results in living organisms losing water very, very quickly, more rapidly. So far, all of our videos have covered the following abiotic components. We have looked at the physiographic factors, the geographical factors. We have looked at the edaphic or soil factors. We have looked at light, temperature, water, atmospheric gases, and wind. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned a lot from our videos.